So I'm going to share a story with you. I want to show you how this works. When I was in college, one of my very close friends was my roommate. And one day he randomly moved out. When I say randomly, he didn't tell me. I got a note in my mailbox saying, "You have been randomly assigned this roommate. And you don't want that because that guy is the guy that nobody wants to live with." And I was very upset. I confronted my friend. I said, "What did I do? Did I do something that upset you? Did I hurt you? Like, why would you do this?" And he wouldn't tell me. And it actually ended up ending our friendship. And it wasn't until years later that I found out that he was gay and that he'd fallen in love with a boy and they'd moved into the river cluster together. And that wasn't what hurt me, that he was afraid to tell me, because a lot of people are afraid to share that kind of thing. What really hurt me was that of our friend group, I was the only one who didn't know, right? I was the one who didn't feel safe. And that was why I wanted to write the Matthew Shepard story. Now notice, I have told you absolutely nothing about the Matthew Shepard story. But can you feel the passion that's driving me to tell that story? That was such a tiny little bit of time. But do you see how it drew you in and made you want to know more? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thursday Night Writes and Happy New Year. For those of you who are podcast listeners, we're also going to release this on the podcast. So you'll be able to re-listen to this. Or if you're listening on the podcast for the first time, Happy New Year to you. We're going to have an awesome ride today. We're going to be talking about pitching in a very specific context. We're getting ready for a very exciting pitch event with Vanessa Johnston, head of television for Mandalay, who's going to be appearing on Thursday Night Writes next week. And we're going to be allowing people to be selected at random. All you have to do is raise your hand. We'll be picking people at random and you'll get feedback on your pitch. We're going to talk today about how to build a 3-minute pitch, because a 3-minute pitch is very different than a normal pitch, right? It's a different form. And so we're going to be talking about how to do that effectively. We're going to be talking about some of Vanessa's likes and dislikes so that you can actually craft your pitch in a way that is going to resonate for her. We're going to be talking about how to overcome some of your fears about pitching, what to do if your pitch isn't going well, if it's falling apart. We're going to talk about how to deal with what the common mistakes are in pitching, and a lot more. And if there are specific things that you're really curious about pitching, please chat them in. I won't be able to get to everything in the chat, but I keep my eyes on the chat. And so if there's something that you just really wish I would cover, please let me know and I'll do the best I can to cover it for you. For those of you who are brand new, we have a packed house today. It's so exciting to see over 200 people in this room. If you're brand new, you have just joined the most wonderful screenwriting community in the world. We meet every week at this time, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We usually have hundreds of writers from all over the world. And it's been so beautiful seeing the accomplishments and the growth. And if you're brand new to Jacob Kruger Studio and you don't know, we are basically trying to revolutionize the way that screenwriting is taught. Right? Traditionally, people go to film school. They graduate with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. They learn from people who are not even writers. And then it's very hard to be a screenwriter because you graduate and you have to service all your debt and you don't have any mentorship when you really need it, which is when you enter the industry. And so what we do is affordable classes. And we have an incredibly affordable one-on-one mentorship program that will pair you with a professional writer who will meet with you every week or every other week, read every page you write, every draft you complete, mentor you through your entire career, and do it for a tiny fraction of what you would pay for grad school. If you're curious about studying with us and you want to get started, you want to dip your toe in the water, we have 2 really awesome things coming up. The first is my Write Your Screenplay class. This is where we learn the foundations of 7-act structure, how to build a screenplay organically. We boil all of screenwriting down to 13 simple concepts that you can use to think about how to build your scripts organically, that you can rely on to know if your work is actually working or not. And that as you continue with us, that You'll notice that everything we teach here is built on those 13 concepts. The other class is a brand new class that students have been asking me to teach for years. So if you've already taken Write Your Screenplay, 7X, we're basically taking the concepts of Write Your Screenplay and we're showing you how to apply them. So each week in that class, we're going to study a different movie and we're going to learn how the 7X structure works in that movie and how to apply it to your own writing. And then, of course, the really cool thing is both of those classes include a one-on-one consultation with a professional writer who will sit down with you for 45 minutes, read 10 pages of your writing, and give you direct feedback that's just for you. The most important thing for you to know about pitching is that all pitching is personal. I don't care if you're pitching in a room like this where there are 238 people, if you're pitching in a conference room with a dozen executives, or if you're pitching one person in an elevator. All pitching is personal. Your pitching is about a bond, a relationship that you are developing with the person that you are talking to. And that's true whether you're talking to a famous person or a famous person's dry cleaner. Pitching is a personal connection. And Mike's asking, how do we relate our story back to ourselves? Why am I the right person to write this script? And this is the most important part of your pitch. The most important part of every pitch is where you start. And the way to start is with something personal, with something vulnerable. Start your pitch with a true story about why you wanted to write this. What that does is it helps the listener understand why you are the one person in the world to tell this story. And believe it or not, they care about it. Does anybody watch Shark Tank? Any of you guys watch Shark Tank? Shark Tank is not pitching, right? Shark Tank is an entertainment show where people show up with llamas and crazy stuff to make a spectacle out of it. And that's not pitching. Pitching is not spectacle. Pitching is relationship. But if you continue past the initial spectacle, there are two questions that the sharks tend to ask. And those are the real questions. The first question is, how much have you sold? And by the way, producers are asking the same question, right? They're going like, well, did your last movie make $100 million? But guess what? That question doesn't mean a lot when you're at the beginning of your career, right? It doesn't matter a lot. If you happen to have some awards, hey, I've placed in 17 contests and I've been a finalist in 3 of them. That's great. Hey, my piece is kicking butt at film festivals around the world. That's a great place to start if that's true. But if you're brand new, then what have you sold doesn't matter. And guess what? Even on Shark Tank, it often doesn't matter if they like the idea. But the second question they ask you is, tell me about you. Tell me about you. As a screenwriter, you are an entrepreneur. You have embarked upon creating something that no one asked you to create, that no one's demanding of you, that you need to bring into the world, and that you're going to need somebody else's money to make happen, most likely. In this way, you are just like an entrepreneur starting a business. And you're going to invest your love and your time and your passion to make this crazy thing come true. Now, one of my students is a billionaire angel investor. And so I asked him, when somebody makes it to your desk, their pitch is already good, right? He's, of course. And I'm assuming when somebody makes it to your desk, there's a good chance that their idea is going to make money. I said, so how do you know who you're going to go with? And he said, I am going with the person who is so crazy that they are going to make this whether or not I give them any money. He's looking for their passion. And that is the same thing Vanessa's going to be looking for. The primary thing she's going to be looking for next week. And this is the primary thing that every single person you pitch for the rest of your life is going to be looking for. They're looking for one of two things. Either how much money have you made in the past or who's attached, which you probably can't win that one. Or they're looking for, do I believe in this person's passion? Do I want to catch a ride on their energy? Does that make sense to you all? And this is why it's so important to start with a personal thing. Vanessa's tough as hell, you'll notice. She's extremely helpful and extremely kind, and she's tough. She's more like a New York personality. She's much more of like a what the fuck is this kind of person, but with kindness and love. And you'll notice if you start without a story that she's going to correct you. She's going to ask you. She's going to push you. People care who's pitching them. No one wants to feel like your script is just throwing something against the wall to see if you can get their money. People want to feel like this is something that you need to bring into the world. So I'm going to share a story with you. I want to show you how this works. So when I was in college, one of my very close friends was my roommate. And one day he randomly moved out. He didn't tell me. I got a note in my mailbox saying, you have been randomly assigned this roommate. And you don't want that because that guy is the guy that nobody wants to live with. And I was very upset. I confronted my friend. I said, what did I do? Did I do something that upset you? Did I hurt you? Why would you do this? And he wouldn't tell me. And it actually ended up ending our friendship. And it wasn't until years later that I found out that he was gay. And that he'd fallen in love with a boy, and they'd moved into the river cluster together. What hurt me was not that he was afraid to tell me, because a lot of people are afraid to share that kind of thing. What really hurt me was that of our friend group, I was the only one who didn't know, right? I was the one who didn't feel safe. And that was why I wanted to write the Matthew Shepard story. Now notice, I have told you absolutely nothing about the Matthew Shepard story. I haven't told you a single thing about it, but do you guys all know that I'm the only writer in the world who could do that version of it? Can you feel the passion that's driving me to tell that story? Right? This is the power. And do you see how short that was? That was such a tiny little bit of time. But do you see how it made you want to know more? It also let you know if I was not the writer for you, which, by the way, is okay. Maybe you come from a very conservative set of values and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound cool. Maybe you come from a more judgmental set of values and you're like, I don't want to work with the guy who made himself unsafe to somebody, even if he did so inadvertently and not realizing. It's okay if somebody hears your pitch or your story and goes, you're not for me. Because you're going to incite an equal amount of passion that goes, you are for me. What if you don't have that personal connection? It's just a super fun story I'm obsessed with, that I'm in love with. How do I connect? There is actually a reason that you are writing this story. So you can tell the story of how you came up with this idea. You can tell the story of how you were disconnected with every other idea in this genre. Let's pretend you were writing Scream. And you go, you know what I hate about horror movies? And you know what I hate about horror movies? They take themselves so damn seriously. And they all play with the same exact tropes. And that's why I wrote Scream. Do you see that there's something that drove you to write this story? And if you don't know what it is, do some journaling. Figure it out. Also, you'll notice there's not only one version of your story. There are 1,000 reasons why you told the story, right? So I could tell you a completely different story. I'm fascinated by the idea of beauty and ugliness and how they exist at the same time in the world. And what I loved about the Matthew Shepard story was I saw this beautiful thing, right? This story of a boy blossoming into who he really is. But that being seen as something ugly, right? And then I saw the ugliest possible thing, right? This horrific murder. But I also saw what that brought about in the world. And some of the things it brought about were beautiful. We have a hate crime legislation because of Judy Shepard. You might not know this, but Judy and Dennis Shepard ended up sparing the life of their son's killer in the name of their son. There are so many different ways to tell the story. So don't look for the one story. Look for the many stories. Does that resonate for you all? You have a week. Go tell your story to 10 different people. Go to a bar, go to a coffee shop, go to a meet and greet, go to someplace where you can talk to other people, hang out afterwards at Thursday Night Writes, get into a breakout room, tell your story 5 different ways to 5 different people. Notice what resonates, notice what doesn't. Does this make sense? Everyone's got it. Your pitch starts with the why you. Now, does it have to start there? No, it could end there. It could happen in a different, but if why you is not part of the pitch, then your pitch is going to sound like buy this. And nobody likes the feeling of buy this, right? Go to buy a pair of jeans and somebody's like, hey, can I help you? How would you like to try those jeans? And you're like, whoa, now I don't want the jeans anymore. Same thing happens if you approach your pitch like a sale, unless you are a great salesperson. If you approach your pitch like a sale, you're going to lose connection. Maggie asked, why do you consider the why you the best place to start? For me, I like to start with the why me. Why did I want to write this story? I like to start with something personal, right? Now, by the way, you want to share something a little bit vulnerable. You want to share something you notice I shared something that wasn't perfect about me, right? I shared something that was a little complicated. But this is also not the time to go, I'm almost over my drug problem, right? This is not the time to scare them. You want to make yourself a little bit vulnerable, right? You want to share something real, right? Because that doesn't happen often, right? How often do you show up and somebody goes, hey, here's my heart, right? And that's true even if you're writing a silly comedy. I have a TV pilot called The Amateurs. It's basically Ocean's 11 if everybody sucked at their jobs. This was my opportunity to laugh at that and to look at the American dream in the silliest possible way, right? So you can tell the story on something silly, on something serious. Anthony, I love what you just said. Anthony said, a successful pitch seems like it's an invitation to continue the conversation. That is so brilliant because it brings us to my next point. If you are a trained salesperson, meaning you are unbelievable at sales, you could sell ice to an Eskimo, you're that person, ignore everything I'm about to say. But if you are a normal human being who walks the earth, who feels scared about pitching, who feels like they still have some growth to be done there, who's not great at talking people into things. Yeah, if you're not William, the always be closing person, and you're just a person who really has this great passion, don't try to sell with your pitch. Let me tell you why. Number one, nobody in the world likes to feel sold. Number two, as a new writer, your chances are of selling your script in the room close to 0. Best case scenario, somebody goes, and I heard Vanessa do this a couple times at Austin where she actually requested scripts. Best case scenario, somebody goes, yes, I would like to read that. Second best case scenario, somebody goes, I wouldn't like to read that, but I'm interested in you, right? What else have you got? That's not the right project for me, but I felt a connection here, right? So instead of using your pitch to try to sell, I want you to use your pitch to try to connect. What that means is when you are pitching, I want you to be looking at Vanessa's eyes. Now, if Vanessa's eyes scare you, then pick somebody in the room whose eyes make you feel safe. You can always look at me. I will always be shooting you love. Or choose anybody else in the room whose eyes make you feel safe. But ideally, you want to be looking at Vanessa's eyes. Now, you're on Zoom. So if you can, on your little Zoom screen, Jose will highlight her. But if you're ever pitching somebody who's not highlighted, drag them up right by your camera. Drag the person you want to look at, kind eyes, right? And I'm reading her face. And I'm seeing what's landing, and I'm seeing what's not landing, and I'm taking all these subtle, nonverbal clues from Despina. And because she's right by my camera, it looks to Despina and to all of you like I'm looking right at you. Do you guys see that? Whereas Suzanne is down at the bottom of my screen. Do you see how now it looks like I'm looking away? So take the person whose eyes you want to look at in a Zoom room and bring them right by your camera so you can stare into those beautiful eyes. Your job is not to sell. Your job is to connect. Your job is to try to understand what is happening for Despina right now when you talk. Now, there are some really great questions in here. I want to answer some of them. Number one, Anthony said it more beautifully than I could. A successful pitch is an invitation to continue the conversation. So make that invitation. Graham asked, do you include a portion of why you think this particular person would be interested in your script, showing you've done the research, or is that weird? It depends. This is why you want to read their eyes and you want to trust your instincts. What are your feelings? But I would certainly say, let's say John Sunt does the funniest 30-minute comedies. They're ridiculous, they're fun, and they're all about the American dream. And I say to John, I'm also obsessed with the American dream. I'm obsessed with this idea that this thing that I don't think is real is also so helpful. And I'm obsessed with the idea of what happens when you stop believing in this thing that's not real. And I think the ability to laugh at that is why I wanted to pitch you today. I'm being real with him. Whereas if I'm just giving John lip service, I saw that you worked with Keanu Reeves, and I think Keanu Reeves would be a strong role for this piece. Do you see how much weaker that is? It's the difference between I want to climb on your shoulders and I want to connect with you. So you want to orient yourself towards I want to connect with you. Sharing something genuine about why you want to connect with somebody is beautiful. If it was the Keanu thing, I would leave that and I'd say later, and the main character, I always thought like Keanu Reeves would be perfect, right? I'd throw it in like I didn't even know John worked with him. And I'd let John go, oh, I guess I could call Keanu. Does that make sense to you guys? In general, right? You don't want to fake this. So much of pitching is just being authentically you. You're not manipulating anybody. Trust me, these people are way too smart. Right? You're not going to manipulate them. You're not going to out salesperson them. You're going to be real with them. So if you feel a real genuine connection with Vanessa and you love something she worked on, tell her. And if you don't, Gavion asked, when do you come across as too passionate? You come across as too passionate when you're trying to act passionate rather than be passionate. It's all about orientation. If your focus is on trying to convince somebody, you are not going to be convincing. Right? If your focus is on trying to show them that you are passionate, you're not going to convince them that you're passionate. You're going to seem like a bad actor. But if you feel genuinely passionate, then show it. Now, by the way, you want to show it in your way. Right? You could tell I'm a pretty expressive guy. Have you guys noticed that? And so it makes sense for me to be pretty expressive. I like to cuss in front of my students for a very specific reason, because I live in a censorship-free zone and there are not enough of them in the world. And I like to show people through my actions that we're in a censorship-free zone right now, that we get to say what we want. And that's me. My former writing partner, John Wyrick, I love the man. Again, Christian. John would never cuss. Not in 1,000 years. And when I hang out with him, I don't cuss because it bothers him. Right? And when we pitched Matthew Shepard, he's a born-again Christian. And we actually began the piece with a hymn, and John sang it. And it was beautiful. But that was just John being John. If somebody else sang it, it wouldn't work. You have to come at your pitch like you are, but you want to come at it with the best version of you. Does that make sense? You want to show honestly who you are. And guess what? If they don't like you, fuck them. This is a great event. We have Vanessa. It's amazing. It's so her to donate her time to come here and be here with you. But guess what? This won't be the last of these events. And this won't be your last opportunity. So I don't want you to think of this. Not everyone's going to like you, right? You don't like everybody. Don't you ever meet somebody who you're like, ugh? Guess what? That person has a best friend. So don't worry about if they like you. Worry about, am I being authentic? Don't worry about trying to prove you're passionate. Worry about, am I showing how I feel? Don't worry about selling your script. Worry about making yourself vulnerable. Trent Owen asks, is there any need for a log line in our pitch or only a self-introduction? So this leads me to my next very important point about pitching. Do not, for the love of God, do not read your pitch. If you try to read your pitch to Vanessa, she will actually make you stop. JD was there for that, right? Do not read your pitch. Because when you read your pitch, what you are actually communicating is, number one, this is not for you. This is for anybody. I'm not sharing something vulnerable with you. I am reading something pre-planned that's the same thing I read for Denise and Kathy and Mariel and William, right? You're actually communicating non-verbally. And remember, 90% of communication is non-verbal. You are communicating when you read your pitch, you're not very special. And you are communicating, instead of trying to connect with you, I'm trying to sell you something. You're also communicating something even worse. You're communicating that you don't know your own damn story. When you read your pitch, you're communicating that I am not confident enough to just tell you the story that is the greatest passion in my life, that I've labored over, that I've pulled apart, that I've rewritten 10 million times, that is so meaningful that I'm asking for your time right now to share it to you. I don't even know it. I don't even know how it works. I'm not even confident enough just to tell you and share it with you. Does that make sense? You're communicating all of that non-verbally when you read your pitch instead of sharing your pitch. You're also depriving yourself of all the thousands of micro nonverbal facial cues that person is sharing with you. You're going to see on Vanessa's face or my face or Despina's face, whoever you're looking at, right? You're going to see if your words are landing or if they're not landing. You're going to see, are they excited? Or are they bored? Are they confused? Are they passionate? Should I just shut up and they go, I want to read this? Right? You're going to see all that and you're going to react to it naturally. If you're reading your pitch, you're not seeing it because you're seeing the words instead of the face. Make sense to y'all? So you're not going to read your pitch. And for the same reason, you're not going to memorize your pitch. Because a memorized pitch, you know what it sounds like? A memorized pitch. And what ends up happening is we end up zoning out. Welcome to Thursday night. You're like, well, where am I? Maybe they'll stop talking soon. 90% of our communication is nonverbal. And if you just allow yourself to look in their face and share it, imagine they are your best friend. Imagine that instead of being impressive head of television for Mandalay, they are your best friend. They already love you. You are sitting at a coffee shop or at a bar or in your living room, and you've been working on this thing that matters so much to you, that you love so much, and you just can't wait to share it with your best friend. And you're going to try to captivate her just like you would your real best friend, right? If your real best friend looked bored, you wouldn't just plow through, right? Or if your real best friend looked excited, you might tell her a little bit more. If your real best friend looked confused, you might clarify, right? So you don't want to memorize your pitch because memorizing your pitch takes you out of the moment. If your pitch is really ready to go, then you just got to tell them the truth. It's already working. You know it better than anybody in the world. You know how every single piece is constructed. You know what happens if you pull this thread and something changes over here, right? All about it. So if you just share the truth, guess what? Your pitch is going to be freaking beautiful. And it's going to be compelling. In fact, one of my favorite pitches that I heard when Vanessa did this at Austin Film Festival, which is where I approached her, the pitch actually wasn't perfect. It was pitched as, JD was there, he probably remembers, it was pitched as like a horror movie, but she didn't hit all the horror movie genre. But she got to the end of it, and what she was trying to say was so powerful that like everyone wanted to see that script made. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be true. Does that make sense? And especially at an event like this, there's no expectation that your script is perfect. In fact, in your pitch, and this is going to be part of the value for all of you, whether you're pitching or just listening, I can hear a pitch and I can know whether it's going to work structurally or not. And so can she, right? If you're really experienced at this, you can see the structural problems in the pitch. You can see the tonal issues in the pitch, right? You can see where the writer is strong and where the writer is still learning in the pitch. And in this format, we're not looking for a perfect pitch. We're looking to help. That's why Vanessa is showing up. She's coming to help. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to help, right? And so part of the value here is even if you come up and you completely flop because your script is broken, and as you pitch, the brokenness comes out. Guess what? That's great. Because you're going to get feedback from one of the best in the industry about how to make it better. So remember that the value here is learning, not selling. The value here is connecting, not convincing. The value here is sharing, not pushing. And if you can put yourself in that orientation, that's not just going to change your success at this pitch. That is going to change your success at every pitch from this point forward for the rest of your life. Does that resonate for everybody? Let's get into should we get into some nitty gritty? Okay. So, don't memorize your pitch, but do practice it. Don't let this be the first time you've pitched. It's too scary. At the end of every Thursday Night Writes, the team opens up breakout rooms for you guys to connect. Join a breakout room. Pitch your script to somebody. Pitch your script to at least one person every day for the next week. Stranger, a friend. Don't pitch it the same way every time. I want you to pitch it a little bit differently every time. Tell a different story. Start in a different way. I want you to develop not a one perfect pitch, but a library of ways to pitch so that if something's not working, you can shift. Right? So those of you who've taken my classes, people take my Write Your Screenplay class like 17 times. And why do they do it? Because I never teach it the same way. Right? I teach it for the people in the room. But there are certain things that we hit every single class, right? There are 13 elements of screenwriting you need to learn, but we learn it in a different way every time, right? Because I'm teaching it for that person. And every time I do it, it's practice. And I go, oh, I love that. I'm going to use that again. And oh, that didn't work. I'm not going to use that again. When I'm pitching an Anthony, I go like that, right? So you start to learn by pitching in different ways. You develop a library of little mini vignettes about your script. Is that working for everybody? Does that make some sense? Okay. So you're going to practice like crazy. Now, how do you deal with the crazy 3-minute thing? How do you deal with that? That's actually the hardest thing about this pitch. And guess what? That only happens at events like this. We have to, because we want to get to a lot of people's pitches, right? And if we let somebody go on for 15 minutes, we just won't get to enough pitches to be of value. But In real Hollywood, I want to draw this distinction because it's so important. When you have a real pitch meeting, there is no such thing as the elevator pitch. It doesn't exist. If you're in an elevator with Martin Scorsese and you start pitching your script and he likes it, he's not getting out when he gets to his floor, or he's going to say, hey, come walk with me, or hey, I want to hear the rest of this. Just like you would if you were hanging out with your friend and you have to make it to a lunch, right? You're not going to be like, sorry, you went for 2.5 minutes. I'm done. You're going to be like, I really want to hear this. Tell me more, but I've got to get to lunch right now. There is no such thing as the elevator pitch. In real life, a pitch is 3 to 5 minutes of shooting the shit, followed by 5 to 10 minutes of talking about your project, followed by 5 to 10 minutes of questions. And then if things are going really well, it goes from there, right? That's what a real pitch is. So it's a very valuable skill to develop the 3-minute pitch because there are so many pitching events, and those pitching events can lead to really wonderful things for you. One thing that you can do is if you have an Apple Watch or a phone, when you're pitching different people, set it in your pocket and have it buzz, but don't have it buzz at 3 minutes. Have it buzz silently, just so you feel it, at 2 minutes. So you know, oh, it's time to start wrapping it up. Does that make sense? Then have it buzz again at 2.5 minutes. So you just learn what 2.5 minutes feels like. Why do I want you to do it for 2.5 minutes as opposed to for 3? If you do it for 3 minutes, exactly 3 minutes, and one thing goes wrong, suddenly you're rushing, right? Or you're not finishing. So think of your 3-minute pitch like a 2.5-minute pitch. And what that does is it gives you a little bit of freedom. It gives you a freedom to gut a little deeper if she looks interested in something. It gives you a freedom to move a little faster if she looks bored. It gives you freedom to introduce another element if she asks a question, right? It gives you freedom. I want you just to get used to what 2.5 minutes of talking feels like. And one of the things you're going to notice, it's actually a long time. If you were hanging out with your friends and you talked for 3 minutes nonstop, your friends are going to be like, what's going on, dude? It's important to realize that 3 minutes is actually a good amount of time, and it's plenty of time. But in order to tell a 3-minute pitch, you cannot tell the whole story, okay? You cannot squeeze your whole movie or your whole TV show into 3 minutes. So this is why you want to practice different approaches. Like, what's the heart of it, right? What's the heart that you want to capture? This is different than a log line, right? A log line is a written form of a pitch, right? And it's very short, right? You are sharing a short story that captures the essence of what your script is about. Now, there are a million ways to do this, right? And I would be wrong to lock you into one formula. But instead, I'm going to share some elements. I'm going to share a way of thinking about this that is going to serve you. Every single pitch is some version of this. This thing that you've heard a million times in a million trailers. In a world where one man or woman with this dominant trait finds themselves in this incredibly ironic situation and needs to achieve this impossible thing before this terrible thing happens. Now, I am not telling you to use that formula because you'll sound like weird movie guy. What I'm telling you is that every pitch is some combination of those elements. Does that make sense? Sometimes premise is done in world, right? In a world where, right? So let's say you are pitching Westworld, right? And you might talk about, hey, this is a world where robots and humans are indistinguishable. It's a playground. where human beings can interact with these robots in the Wild West that have real feelings and real emotions, indistinguishable from the humans they're interacting with. And it's a world where when people are removed from consequences, we get to see their darkest and most beautiful elements of their nature, right? It's a world where we start to ask the question of, is there actually a God? Or are we all simply acting out our own programming? Do we actually have choice? Do you see how I'm pitching World of Westworld? And I did it in 30 seconds. And you already know if you want to watch Westworld or not, right? So you can lean into World. Some movies, World is not a part of it, right? You're pitching Pretty Woman, don't start with World, right? If you're pitching Pretty Woman, you might start with character, right? You might start with, hey, Julia Roberts is a sex worker, right? She's not the average sex worker. She has a code, right? She has a code where she doesn't fall in love. She has a code where she doesn't kiss. Do you see how I'm building it with character? So instead of pitching World in that case, or starting with World, I'm starting with this character with this unique dominant trait. Does that make sense? Now, a lot of people make the mistake. Somebody asks them, like, who's your character? And you go, the character is Emily Steele. Now, sure, give her a name. Tell us she's Emily. That's fine. But we don't care what her name is. We care what her dominant trait is. We care what she's like. Does that make sense? Emily Steele is the smartest woman in the room, right? She is intimidatingly brilliant, right? When she opens her mouth, people tremble. People's lives are changed. People's trajectories are shifted, right? So we can start with the character's how, or I could pitch her in a completely different way. I could say Emily Steele is the life of the party, right? But I'm not going to say anything cliche. The purpose of your pitch is to distinguish your script from others in the genre. The purpose of your pitch is to distinguish your script from others in the genre. So if you find yourself saying things in your pitch that everybody else says, guess what? You're not distinguishing yourself, right? So what are the things you hear all? She has to overcome obstacles. She has to learn about herself, right? Or she's the life of the party, right? That's not wrong, but it's not specific. It's not distinguishing herself. But if I said, Emily Steele is the life of the party and she doesn't drink. Emily Steele is the life of the party, but she's actually got a really dark point of view. Emily Steele is the life of the party, but she's never been to a bar or a sporting event. Emily Steele is the life of a party in the drawing rooms of Victorian London. That I'm taking that life of a party and I've made it specific. That you're getting a sense of this character is slightly different than the other life of the party characters we've met. Y'all with me? So you can start with character. Almost always, somewhere in your pitch, we need to know who the character is. And we need to know who the character is so that we can understand the irony. So we need to know who she is. We need to know what she wants, right? And hopefully what she wants is something cool for who she is, right? Emily Steele is the life of the party and all she wants is 10 minutes of silence, right? So we might have irony just in the want. We might have irony in the choice she makes. We might have irony in what happens. Emily Steele is the life of the party, but the party is over. There's a zombie apocalypse happening, right? But guess what? It is 2035, and Emily is going to keep this party going even if they all go down with the ship, right? You can have an ironic twist in the want, in the obstacle, in the choices the character makes. What you're actually looking for as you pitch your script is a series of ironic twists in the structure. Does that make sense to you guys? And you can't have irony if we don't know who the character is. If I go, Sean wins an Academy Award, I don't know if Sean is already an Academy Award winning writer or if he's a plumber from Staten Island. I need to know who the character is so I can understand what's cool about their want, so that I can understand the irony of their choices, so that I can understand the journey that they go through, and so that I can understand what this all means, why this all matters today. Does that make sense to you all? Okay. So, you can pitch any element in a world where the dominant trait, the goal, the quest, the obstacle, the threat, the choice, the change, the theme, you can choose any of these things or all of these things. But almost always, if your script doesn't have a character, it's not going to work. Does that make sense? If your pitch doesn't have a character, it's not going to work. Okay. Another couple of quick things I want to share with you. Do not rush. You're going to feel, oh my God, I only have 3 minutes, and you're going to feel scared. It's a normal part of pitching. I get scared. I get scared before every class, right? It's natural to feel scared when you're addressing an audience. The urge when we feel scared is to rush. When we rush, we communicate that we don't know what the hell we're doing. We make it hard for the person who's listening to us to actually understand what we're saying. We make it hard for the things we're sharing to actually land on the person we're pitching. So we're not going to rush. You got 3 minutes. Guess what? That's a crap load of time. So when you feel the instinct to rush, when you feel scared, what you're going to do instead is breathe. If you're really brave, you're going to breathe twice. Now, what happened when I breathed twice? What happened for you? When I breathed twice, somebody chatted. You relaxed. You paid attention. You leaned in. You slowed down. That's right. It caught your attention. This is what people don't realize. When you speed up, you lose their attention. When you rush, you lose their attention. And you communicate anxiousness. When you breathe, it gives you power in the room. It gives you a chance to come up with your next thought. It calms everybody down. If their mind is racing, it keeps their mind from racing. It literally changes the physiology of your body, right? But here's the best thing about breathing. Usually, people are afraid of silence. What that means is if you just breathe twice, usually the producer you're pitching will ask you a question. And now you're not doing this weird thing where you're monologuing. They've actually shown you exactly where they're interested, and they're telling you what to share with them. It's like taking a test when you already have the answers. So breathe twice. Maybe Vanessa will ask you a question. That's the best thing that can happen. If not, you'll have a chance to settle yourself. You'll have her attention, and then you can move to the next step of your pitch. Is everybody with me on all this? Do not rush. If you don't finish your pitch, it is not the end of the world. So prepare a 2.5 minute pitch. Guess what? If you don't finish, it's not the end of the world. It's an invitation to continue the conversation. But if you rush your pitch, you will land nothing, right? Rushing your pitch is the equivalent of not pitching. Reading your pitch is the equivalent of not pitching. Memorizing your pitch is the equivalent of not pitching, because all pitching is personal. Pitching is a nonverbal and verbal sharing of an experience that makes somebody lean in and go, I want to know more about this piece, or I want to know more about you. When somebody tries to poke a hole in your pitch, that's a good sign. Producers don't waste their time poking holes in stuff they don't care about. If somebody really hates your pitch, they're much more likely to be like, oh, that's very nice. Thank you so much. They're not going to be like, yeah, but isn't that just like this movie? They're not going to be like, I just don't understand why the character makes that choice. Right? When they ask you a hard question, your urge might be to get defensive. But instead, I want you to remember, nobody asks a hard question unless they're interested. When they ask a hard question, they are basically asking you, show me that this isn't a problem. Right? Which raises a question. What if it is a problem? Right? You're pitching. You don't know you've got a problem. But it turns out you're pitching to somebody really brilliant who's more experienced than you are. And they go, what about this? And guess what? If it's a problem, you go, wow, thank you. That is a giant problem. You're 100% right. I have an idea for how to address it. Do you think something like this would work? Or I have to figure out how to address that problem. Hey, if I address that problem, could I share it with you again? Does that make sense to you guys? Every pitching opportunity is an opportunity to build a relationship. And this is the most important thing to remember. The purpose of a pitch is not to sell your script. Because most pitches, you're not going to sell your script. The purpose of a pitch is not to get them to read your script. That's just a nice thing that sometimes happens. The purpose of a pitch is not to build your career, to take a step forward, to take advantage of the opportunity. That's not the purpose. The purpose of a pitch is to build a relationship. Or to realize that this relationship is not for you. We succeed in this industry by surrounding ourselves with people who get us and who we get. Without Jose and Valeria and Summer and my incredible faculty members, there is no Jacob Kruger Studio. This exists because of the people that I'm surrounded by. And the same thing is true with the people you are surrounded by. And there are wonderful people who cannot be on your team because they're not your people. So if at the end of your pitch you realize, holy crap, Vanessa is not my producer, guess what? That's great news. But if at the end of the pitch you and she both realize, hey, we vibe, that's also great news. That's the real purpose of your pitch. It is all about connecting, right? It is all about going, are you my people? And this is the last thing that I want to share. You guys are going to learn a lot more next week because Vanessa's going to be dropping truth bombs on you all. This is the last thing that I'm going to share with you today. And then I'll hang out for another 10 minutes and we could do some question and answer. When you realize that either this pitch, this person is not for you, this relationship is not right, every pitch is an opportunity to build a mentorship situation. You want to be reading the eyes of the person you're pitching. So let's say I'm pitching Carter. Carter Kuntz is looking at me right now, and I'm going to be honest, he looks a little skeptical. Now, he might actually be skeptical or not, but I looked at his eyes and I saw maybe just a little taste of skepticism. So what I'm going to say to Carter is, this isn't really for you, is it? Now, Carter might be like, no, I'm eating this up. I love this. Okay, great. Or Carter might be like, hey, my dog died yesterday. In which case, I'm not going to try to pitch Carter my script or my class or anything else. I'm going to go, oh my God, Carter, should I come back another time? I'm so sorry. Right? Or Carter might be like, no, I was thinking this is what my face looks like when I'm thinking. But if Carter goes, no, Jake, you're right. This is not for me. I'm going to go, great for sharing that. I'm not going to try to overcome their no. No means no. Unless you're a salesperson. If you're a real salesperson, you can overcome no's. If you're not, no means no. The moment you get a no, you are going to ask yourself, you're going to ask them, hey, I can see this is not for you. Can I pick your brain for a moment? Because now you're building a mentorship situation. And usually they'll say, sure, because now they don't even have to pass in your script. And you go, hey, I know this is not for you, but I also know the script is beautiful. I've worked my butt off on it. I've had mentorship. I've gotten feedback. The script works. And I know it's not for you, but I know it's going to be successful because it's like this movie and it's this movie and it's this movie that were successful, or this TV show or that TV show that was successful. So I know it's going to be successful. It has roles for these actors, right? It can be made for this much money. You're going to share those things. If you were in my shoes, and then you're going to pitch it, right? You're going to share what it's about. If you were in my shoes, I know it's not for you. Who would you bring it to? Do you see what I just did? Now they don't have to tell you. Now they're your mentor. Then you shut up. Stop talking. Because usually they will come up with a name. I bring it to Chris. Thank you so much. Oh, that's amazing. Can I mention your name when I call Chris? If they say yes, great. If they say no, great. Don't lie, right? Just call Chris out of the blue. Don't you mention their name. But now, do you see you're not making a cold call? You're making a warm call. And then as soon as you get to yes, you get the hell out, right? So if you're pitching your script to Vanessa and she goes, I'd actually like to read that. Don't go, oh, let me tell you one more thing. Because the only way you can go from yes is no. If you're pitching your script and you get to yes, or if they go yes, you can mention my name when you call. Or if the yes is just, you can't mention my name, but I would definitely bring it to Chris O'Lett. Right? Then you're going to say this. You're going to say, thank you so much. It means so much like for me that somebody like you would help somebody like me. And I really needed the help. I'll let you know how it goes. Thank you so much. And do you see what I just did? I just opened up an opportunity to email them and tell them how it goes. I'm building what may be a lifelong connection, might be a lifelong friendship. We might do 50 movies together, or they might be the person who I call and I pick their brain for the rest of my life. This is how you start to build your connections, your network, your team, your people in this industry. Make sense to everybody? Not everybody needs this, but Vanessa likes it. Start by telling her what it is. Now, you can start with your story, but before you get into the meat of the pitch, tell her what it is. And tell her the title. So what it is means this is a half-hour comedy. This is a half-hour dramedy, right? This is a feature murder mystery. She primarily works in TV. If you have a great TV script, pitch her. But if you don't have the script you're most passionate about, she's just as happy to listen to feature films or anything else. She's here to teach you. Tell her the title. You could tell her the title at the end if that makes more sense, but make sure you tell her the title and what it is because she likes to be pitched that way. The last thing, have comps in your back pocket. I don't like to lead with comps because everybody does, and I like to be different than everybody else. But make sure you have comps. And by the way, comps is not, it's this meets that meets this, but meets, right? Comps are like this meets that. It's Taxi Driver, but it's a comedy. That's a comp, right? If you pitch your two movies, if you're like, it's Taxi Driver meet Pretty Woman, I don't know what the fuck that is. If you pitch your comps and people don't immediately go, oh, I get what that is, it's not a comp. Have your comps in your back pocket. If at any point a person looks confused, you go, so it's basically Taxi Driver, but it's a comedy. Or if you get to the end of the pitch, there's a chance that often a producer will ask you for comps. and then you can pull them out of your back pocket. That is a million things to think about with your pitch. We usually end on time. I've already run 10 minutes late. I am going to hang out for another 10 minutes just to do Q&A because I didn't get to a lot of the things in the chat. I don't have time to scroll back up. If you have a question that didn't get answered that you need the answer to, please chat them in because it will go faster. Should your script be finished for what you pitch? Great question, Mike. Normally, you don't pitch your script normally until it's a freaking Lamborghini, right? You pitch your script when you know it's beautiful, it's perfect, it's done. In an event like this, if you have a script that's perfect, beautiful, and done, pitch that. Because she might go, I'd like to read that, in which case you can just send it. But this is an educational opportunity. The most important thing is take the chance, right? It's better to mess it up and take the chance than it is to keep your mouth shut because you never know what's going to happen and you're going to learn no matter what. So if your script is a mess, no problem. You'll probably get some feedback off of your pitch that helps you make your script better, right? If your script is started but not completed, you can tell us at the beginning, hey, this project is not completed. It's just started, but I want to share it with you, right? Vanessa knows that you are here in an educational setting and her goal is to help you take your next step, whatever that next step is. Ooh, so many great questions. How long should a pitch deck be? For this, you're not going to have a pitch deck because you're just pitching verbally. Pitch decks are a whole other concept. It's too big to get into. But in general, keep things short, right? Nobody likes to read. Keep things short. There should be two versions of your pitch deck. If you were pitching with a pitch deck, there should be a version that has very little text that you use to give a sense of atmosphere when you talk. And then there should be a version with more text that you can send along. How do I determine who's going to get pitched to? We're going to pick randomly. So we're going to have you raise your hands at the beginning if you want to pitch. And by the way, you don't have to pitch to come to this event. You can come to this event just to learn. But at the beginning, we're going to ask everybody who wants to pitch to raise their hand. And then we have a system to randomly choose people. Graham, an email pitch is a terrible situation. I hope you never have to do it. It's really hard because pitching is personal. An email pitch is usually a log line, a brief, hey, I met you at this place, a title, a log line, and thank you very much. You want to keep it short and you want to make sure your subject is 100% clear about who you are. Should pitching an animated series be any different? Greg, I'm glad you asked this question. Whatever you're pitching, your pitch should feel like the project. So if your pitch is really deep, you should sound really deep. If your pitch is woo, you should sound really. If your pitch is silly, you should be silly, right? If your script is sad, you should pitch it sad, right? You want your pitch to feel like your script. That's the most important thing, right? So if you're pitching a family-friendly animated series, don't cuss and pitch in a light tone. And if you're pitching BoJack Horseman, hit us with 7,000 puns and then make us cry. Darlene, great question. Should you pitch the pilot or the series? What a great question. When you're pitching a series, 90% of your pitch should be the pilot. And then you should save your last couple sentences to show how this is going to work over the course of the series. Almost always that's the right answer. If it's an ensemble piece, you're probably going to have to pitch each character, right? So you're going to practice coming up with quick ways to go, and here's Tracy, and this is what she's like, and here's Deborah, and that's what she's like, right? And as you can imagine, that goes crazy. And then there's Vicenza, and she's like this, and Suzanne, oh my God. You're going to pitch all these different characters, what they want, and you're going to pitch it in a way that we can feel the ironic pressure between these characters. Does that make sense? Usually, especially in TV, if you just pitch the characters, we'll see the engine and we'll see how the pilot works. Also, when in doubt, if your script works, follow the order of the script. So if in your script, we meet Deborah first, pitch Deborah first. And then we meet Denise, then pitch Denise. If you try that and it's not working, that's often a sign that your script isn't working, right? If you're like, wow, I really have to pitch Clay first, then there's a good chance that actually maybe Clay needs to show up first in your pilot. But if you just pitch your main cast members in a pilot or an ensemble piece, we're going to get the structure because your pitch is basically, this is Alicia. This is what she's like. This is what she wants. This is the ironic choice she makes. This is the ironic situation. This is the conflict, right? And guess what? It gets worse because this is Troy. And let me tell you about Troy, right? And now we're putting the pressure on the character. Wendy, what is she specifically looking for? I have no idea, and neither do you, and you'll never know. In real Hollywood, you want to use that first 5 minutes where you're just talking to people to find out what they're looking for. You want to ask them, because the truth is, even if I knew what she was looking for a week ago, it's going to be something different this week. She's already sold that or failed to sell that. And this is one of the reasons I'm really excited. You're pitching a person who spends her life listening to pitches 24/7 and pitching people 24/7. You're getting access to one of the most experienced people you could possibly get in pitching, who's pitching at the very highest level and listening to pitches at the very highest level. What is she looking for? Who knows? She'll know it when she sees it, right? It's hard to research executives, right? Because they don't show up in IMDb in the same way that an executive producer would or a writer would. So it's a little harder to research. It's a little harder to figure out what projects they're on. Don't worry about that. Show up with the project that you're most passionate about. Show up with the one that you're desperate to share. Pretend she's your best friend. She wants to hear the thing you're passionate about. That's what she's looking for, right? And if it happens to be what she's looking for commercially, great. And if not, that's okay, because you're going to get to learn from her, and that's going to be amazing. Any tips for pitching a character-driven story? It's the same way, right? It doesn't matter if you're pitching Mission Impossible or if you are pitching Beasts of the Southern Wild. It doesn't matter. Sure, Mission Impossible, there's a little bit more world, but there's just as much world in Beasts of the Southern Wild, right? What's Beasts of the Southern Wild about? It's about a little girl who's going to lose her dad, and she doesn't want to. She's going to lose her dad. She's going to lose her world, right? It's about a little girl confronting global warming in an expressionistic way, right? It's a little indie film, but it's still just about, in a world where a woman with this dominant trait finds herself in this ironic situation, must go on this incredible quest, overcome this incredible obstacle before this terrible thing happens, right? It's going to be some combination of those elements every single time. Pablo, you can absolutely pitch her a short film. You just want to be aware that Hollywood doesn't make short films. So if you're pitching a short film, you want to have the, how could this be spun out pilot, or how could it be spun out into a feature? You want to have that idea in your back pocket. Okay. Kathy's doing a pitch. She has 10 minutes. How much of the story does she tell? You tell the whole story, but not all the details of it. Don't hold back your ending, especially if your ending's good, right? You want to share the most exciting twists and turns of your script. 10 minutes is a long pitch. I have a masterclass where we spend 6 hours like about how that works, right? That's not a question I can answer quickly, because in order to do a 10-minute pitch, you need structure. But if 7-act structure, if you study with me, you're basically pitching the act breaks of each of your 7 acts. You're pitching those big character choices, those big movements that they're going through. Will I give preference to those of us pitching half-hour comedies? Absolutely not. I'm giving no preference to anybody. It is totally random. I feel like that's the only fair way to do it. One pitch multi-genre or cross-genre, a more fluid way. Hit the primary genre and then hit the secondary genre. So if I think about BoJack Horseman, cross-genre, right? It's a drama, but it's mostly silly. So I'm going to pitch mostly silly, and then I'm going to make them cry, right? Whereas I'm pitching Succession, which is also funny as hell, but it's mostly a drama, I'm going to pitch the dramatic elements, and every once in a while I'm going to make them chuckle, right? You're going to lead with what's the main feeling we're getting, and that's where you're going to focus. Maggie, should I mention all the awards it has won? Absolutely. This is not the time to hide. Show whatever your best hand of cards are, right? I said at the beginning, for most new writers, starting off with how much have you sold, a version of that question is impossible. But if you've won a bunch of awards, absolutely tell them. You could tell them at the beginning, you could tell them at the end, you can tell them wherever you want to tell them. If you got money attached, hey, we got $1 million, we need 3, tell them. If you got a star attached, tell them, right? But don't make shit up, right? Don't tell, oh, I got Mike Johnston attached, right? Because she might be like, I want Mike. Great. And you're like, oh shit, I got to go get Mike Johnston, right? Don't make shit up. But if it's real, share it. Can you use indie film titles in your comps? If you're writing for indie, yes. But if they're indie films that no one's seen, the comps aren't going to do it for you, right? So if it's something that premiered at Sundance and never got a release, the chances are she's never seen it, right? But if it's something that premiered at Sundance and got a wide release, then there's a good chance she's seen it. If it's won an Academy Award, if you're nominated for a Golden Globe, right? If you're pitching indie, you never want to make a producer feel stupid for not having seen it. And your comp doesn't do anything for them if they can't go, oh, I get it. If you're pitching in the indie world, it's a little different, right? You're pitching somebody from Mandalay, right? So she's in the mainstream world. If you're pitching somebody from a tiny independent film company, they're going to know that world inside out. I'm going to answer one more question. Do I mention actors only if they are attached? But I'm not sure if Mitchell, is Vanessa interested in knowing we won an Emmy? You know the answer to that question. I guess I'm going to answer more than one question. Should we be prepared to touch on other projects, or is it mainly a critique of one pitch? This will be our last question. For the purpose of today or next week, you are pitching one project and you're getting feedback on one project. But in a real pitch, almost always after you finish your pitch, if they like it, almost always they go, oh, I love this. We got something similar in development. What else have you got? So in a real pitch, you always have something in your back pocket. And it's part of the reason you use the beginning of the project to find out what they're looking for, right? Because if they're looking for something different, you go, I was actually going to pitch you this, but hearing what you're interested in, I actually want to pitch you something else. Is that cool? Because why not pitch them what they like? Thank you, all you wonderful people, for coming out. Please help us spread the word. We want to blow Vanessa away with how many people we get for this event so that she comes back and so that we can attract other wonderful producers to come and listen to you guys and teach you guys and speak for you guys. Please help us spread the word. Please tell your friends. Come, have a good time, learn, and keep coming to Thursday Night Writes. We do a different topic every week. We do writing exercises, hang out in the breakout rooms, get to know this community because it is really a beautiful one. Thank you so much. I'll see y'all next week.